revealed how one billionaire's son shockingly transformed his attitude towards a hidden heroine. Blake Hutchinson stood at the sprawling Texas ranch, the weight of his life crashing upon him like the August heat. The golden afternoons gilded with wealth began to feel like chains. He smirked at the sight of his father, a man whose life had been built on oil fortunes, and yet, as the elder Hutchinson's health sank into a quiet decline, a storm brewed within Blake, uncharted and fearsome. He looked the part, his tailored suit crisp, but beneath that impeccable exterior lay a core of vice that had poisoned every relationship. He was royalty in a kingdom that lacked substance, surrounded by sycophants who whispered sweet nothings into his ear while mocking the very struggles they'd never faced. Unbeknownst to him, a collision was imminent, a collision with truth. Life had become a continuous loop of extravagant parties and idle chatter. Yet now, as rumors of his father's health spread through their elite circle, Blake felt an unsettling hollowness. The thought of stepping into a more meaningful existence squeezed at his chest. What lay beyond the sparkling facade? His hands began to tremble. Was he prepared to confront the reality that a single crisis could unravel a life spent in comfort? It started with Sophie Adams, the owner of a vibrant taco truck, unknowingly sewn into the fabric of his gilded world. Her stand, a bubble of color against the monochrome world of the Hutchinsons, bustled with energy, attracting those who sought something real. To him, she was merely another vendor at an upcoming family gala, a crude interruption to his plans. But as he caught sight of her juggling her 2 jobs and wrangling her daughter through the crowd of oblivious upper crust, he felt a twinge of unease. This, he realized, was grit, a virtue he had dismissed for far too long. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Blake's chest tightened further every moment he witnessed Sophie's unwavering dedication, a raw contrast to his pathway paved with privilege. As he drove through the estate's manicured lawns, a kernel of dread planted itself deep within him. Could he be like her? Questions danced in his mind. He pictured her struggles. Each taco she flipped, each smiling customer was a step towards survival for her and her daughter. How many sacrifices had she made? The truth gnawed at him. What did it mean to fight for something real?
But the nagging fear of losing his status twisted inside him. The society he belonged to mocked those like Sophie. They'd scoff at her work ethic, reduce her to an attraction rather than the hard-working single mother she was. Staring into the reflective glass of his car, Blake wrestled with an unimaginable choice that would ripple through both their lives. Would he stand against the tide, defy those who had laughed amongst the shadows of privilege, risking everything, or succumb to his birthright, choosing apathy over empathy? Each day blurred lines. Uncertainty invaded his world like a shadow creeping behind laughter. Now, standing on the precipice of revelation, he began to see his own life in the stark light of day, a glass palace constructed atop the hard realities where she lived. He could sense the painful truth closing in like a vice. What solidified on his tongue, the taste of resentment, brewed only richer with the realization. If he were to embrace Sophie, wouldn't he be fighting against those he called friends? The spiraling thoughts began to tighten. Just as he formulated a plan to reach towards her, he bore witness to the distance that would cost him everything. The sun dipped low over the horizon as Blake grappled with the choice confronting him. Each glance out of the windshield revealed the stark contrast between his world, a pristine estate, untouched green grass, and that of Sophie, where vibrant colors thrived amidst hardship. The reality stung, forcing him to confront the glitter of wealth that had once been his pride, yet now felt like an albatross. Driving to his father's office emptied his head, but filled his heart with dread. Conversations bubbled along the edges of his thoughts, whispers of a life lined with privilege, opposed to an existence defined by struggle. Who was he really? A privileged heir gripped by fear? Or could he transform into something more authentic? The dissonance corrugated his gut with each mile, and for the first time, the allure of the familiar soured. He pulled into the parking lot, where sleek cars lined the edged asphalt, a parade of success. As he stepped out, disengaged from the shell of his suit, he encountered a knot in his stomach, a tightening that threatened to strangle him if he didn't act. As he paced through the glass doors, his father's office loomed ahead, but his mind propelled him elsewhere, to Sophie, the singular soul whose mere existence bared Blake's hidden depths. "Blake," his father's voice snapped him back. "You're late. We have a board meeting." "Of course, Dad," he replied, mechanically adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. But instead of the customary "yes, sir" demeanor, he felt resistive energy building within him, a primal call to embrace something life-altering. As the meeting unfolded, a facade capped by polished words and hollow promises engulfed the polished conference room.
Investors highlighted growth projections, all while Blake sat reevaluating the very foundation beneath him. Their interests, centered on profit margins, seemed devoid of meaning. How many families were sacrificed for their ascendance? Halfway through the session, his phone buzzed with a message. A picture of Sophie smiling outside her taco truck, her daughter perched on her hip, a jubilant moment of life. An unexpected surge of warmth enveloped Blake. This glimpse of reality contrasted sharply with his sterile world, so authentic, so beautiful. He had begun to understand, however clumsily, the weight of unnoticed burdens, the shimmering truth hidden in Sophie's grit. His heart raced, a rebellious drumbeat against the machinations of power swirling around him. Why had he been so blind? The voices of his colleagues faded into white noise as a plan coalesced in his mind. He envisioned investing time and resources into something meaningful, fueling the spirit of those who, like Sophie, forged ahead against the odds. Was he capable of becoming that change? The thought resonated beyond mere ambition. It pulsated like a heartbeat. Post-meeting, he excused himself, a sharp crack in his usual composure, leaving behind a cloud of confusion that hung in the air. He drove to the location of Sophie's truck, heart thumping louder than the engine's hum. Just as he neared her stand, he spotted an unexpected scene, a group of teenagers jeering at her, their taunts echoing off the windows of chic boutiques. In that moment, anger rose within him, cold and fierce. If he didn't intervene, what did that say about him? Could he really stand by and allow the hero he sought to embrace be belittled? His decision solidified. This was the moment he would take his stand. Stepping out of the car, he approached with conviction. "Leave her alone," Blake declared, the authority laced in his voice surprising him. The protesting youths paused, caught off guard, and for the first time in what felt like years, Blake felt real. The collective laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. His pulse quickened as he prepared for the fallout. What would follow this confrontation, and how deeply would it entangle him into Sophie's world, a world he had only begun to understand? The time had come to face not just the teenagers, but the reckoning within himself. The stillness that followed his outburst felt electric, hanging thick in the air and transforming the atmosphere around Blake. The teenagers shifted uneasily, momentarily stripped of their bravado. This confrontation was new for Blake. It wasn't casual banter at a board meeting, or defensively clutching a glass of fine whiskey. He had stepped into a realm of personal accountability, and the weight of his words bore down on him with a potency he had yet to truly understand. One of the teens, a lanky boy with a tattoo sneaking up his arm, widened his eyes in mock surprise. "What's it to you, rich kid?"
He sneered, crossing his arms defiantly, yet his voice quaked under Blake's steady glare. Blake felt a rush of uncertainty. What could he say that would matter? Words were always easy, but action rang louder, didn't it? "She's just trying to make a living," he countered, voice firm yet cautious. "You think it's easy? You think it's fun?" Another teen scoffed, but Blake pressed on, no longer merely defending Sophie, but defending a cause that had ignited something deep within him, a new sense of purpose. "You think your laughter means something? Look at her. She's building something, and you're tearing it down without a second thought." As he surveyed her taco truck, Sophie began to glean what was happening. She straightened up, her surprise morphing into an expression of quiet gratitude. In her eyes, Blake found a flicker of validation, something he hadn't realized he desperately sought. He was confronting something larger than himself, a world where privilege often cloaked itself in apathy. The teen with the tattoo muttered something inaudible before the group stepped back, uneasy and confused. "Whatever, man," was a parting shot before they retreated, mingling back into the throng of pedestrians. Blake remained poised, his heart racing, yet the tension released itself slowly, like air escaping a balloon. He turned towards Sophie, who was staring at him in disbelief, processing the transformation of the moment from ridicule to a defense born of conviction. "Are you okay?" he asked, genuine concern threading through his voice. Sophie tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that softened her tough exterior. "I've dealt with worse," she replied, though the tender quaver in her voice betrayed her. "Thanks for stepping in. You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," he replied, and for once in his life, Blake felt authentic, the clashing identities within him quieting to a singular truth. His journey had begun with a single decision, a step that now felt monumental. "What were you doing here, Blake?" she pursued, her brow furrowing in gentle concern. "You have your own world." "I don't want it anymore. Not the way it's been," he said, the revelation both liberating and terrifying. I think I need to find my own way. It's hard to explain, but I want to make a difference, like you do. The moment hung between them, ripe with unspoken promises and uncharted territories. You're serious? She asked, assessing him carefully, eyes searching for deception. More serious than I've ever been, he affirmed, a quiet strength growing within him. What if I could help? Not just with advice or ideas, but actually getting involved, making sure people understand what you do, why it matters. Sophie's guarded expression cracked slightly, hope dancing hesitantly in the shadows of her wariness. That's a tall order, Blake. It's not just about throwing money at something or slapping a label on it.
You'd need to understand a lot more about what people truly need. And I want to learn, he implored, feeling bold, unencumbered by the weight of his past. The prospect of collaborating with her ignited something visceral within him, a call to action that had been dormant for far too long. You'd need to understand a lot more about what people truly need. And I want to learn, he implored, feeling bold, unencumbered by the weight of his past. The prospect of collaborating with her ignited something visceral within him, a call to action that had been dormant for far too long. Well, she said, skepticism rippling across her features, if you're willing to do the work, then maybe we can talk about that, but don't think it'll be easy. I wouldn't have it any other way, he replied, his voice steady with determination. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of hope, they lingered in shared silence, both acutely aware that this conversation marked the start of a profound transformation. But the shadows were still thick, and a storm loomed on the horizon of Blake's past, threatening to disrupt the path he was beginning to forge. The decision before him now loomed larger than any business deal. Could he truly navigate the complexities of compassion without losing himself in the process? And more importantly, would he be ready for the inevitable consequences that awaited him as the truth about his family's expectations and the grip of his past life surged forward to challenge everything he yearned to achieve? The taco truck glimmered under the fading sunlight, its bright colors almost defiant in the proximity of the bustling street. For Blake, the air had changed. The tension that lingered post-confrontation had woven itself into something warmer, yet it still pulsed with the anxiety of unwritten chapters ahead. He felt lighter, as if the act of standing up had peeled away some layers that he had thought were unshakable. "How about we grab a taco?" Sophie suggested, her tone lighter now, teasing a smile into existence. Blake instinctively reached for his wallet, a habit etched into him from years of privilege, but Sophie rolled his eyes playfully. She wasn't looking for charity, and neither was he. "It's on me, don't worry." Skepticism flared within him. He had always been taught to see transactions as an exchange, money for goods. "Are you sure? I can—" "Just enjoy the moment," she interrupted gently, her voice cutting through his ingrained reluctance to accept generosity. As they moved toward the truck, he watched her in action. With swift, practiced movements, Sophie flipped tortillas, assembled tacos, and placed them deftly into waiting hands. This was her space. She was in command here. For Blake, it was a refreshing revelation. Where business meetings were dictated by conclusions drawn from PowerPoint slides, here lived raw passion and authenticity. Her energy resonated with him, igniting an unfamiliar desire to be a part of something genuine. The tacos were spiced with simplicity, bursting flavors that danced on his tongue. He felt enlivened. With each bite, he was not just consuming food, he was tasting resilience and ambition, the kind that thrived in the face of adversity. He glanced at Sophie, her focus unwavering as she engaged with her customers, and a flicker of admiration blossomed in his chest. "Do you ever get tired?" he asked, vulnerability eking out his curiosity. He glanced at Sophie, her focus unwavering as she engaged with her customers, and a flicker of admiration blossomed in his chest. "Do you ever get tired?" he asked, vulnerability eking out his curiosity. "Tired? Sure. But you'd be surprised how energizing this part of the process is," she remarked, a light laugh escaping her lips. "It's not just about filling bellies. It's about connection, about creating something that brings people together." Those words struck a chord deep within him, awakening a sense of longing that had been buried under his family's expectations. He had been given everything, but had chosen nothing, an artificial existence strung along by the threads of privilege. "What if I helped you promote this?" he proposed, a rush of enthusiasm spilling forth. "I know people, and I can reach an audience. Together we could amplify your message. We could make people see what this all stands for." Sophie raised an eyebrow, weighing his proposition. "This isn't just social media clicks, Blake.
You have to live it to understand it. It's not enough to just have influence. You need to connect with people on a personal level. Are you willing to put in the effort it takes to truly understand? The question buzzed in his mind, reframing his perspective. The luxury of the past was easy, but this, a life lived with purpose, would be riddled with challenge and growth. I'm ready, he insisted, enunciating each word with a newfound weight. A trace of skepticism still danced in her expression. All right then, it starts tomorrow. There's a community market, and I could use an extra hand. You ready to get some dirt under your nails? He couldn't suppress the grin that broke across his face. I'm in. As they wrapped up, Blake felt the strain of his past flickering into the background, overshadowed by flickers of possibility. The alliances he would form with Sophie loomed like a horizon bursting with light, but the shadows of his old life still whispered warnings. Questions surged within him. How would he merge this newfound vigor with the world he had left behind? What would happen when the inevitable confrontation with his family arrived? The fear of disappointment gnawed at his gut, a remnant of teachings that expected him to embody a different role. In the distance, familiar laughter echoed, a sound that belonged to his father's colleagues, threatening to unravel the resolve that bloomed in his chest. The decision loomed, and Blake realized he needed to brace himself for the break. The time had come to face his past, lest it shadow the growth he fiercely craved. Would he have the courage to shatter the expectations that had encased him? The next morning dawned with the crisp clarity of purpose that invigorated Blake in a way he had not experienced before. The goal was simple: immerse himself in Sophie's world and help her with the market, but the gravity of that decision expanded with each passing moment.
The hours leading up to their collaboration were tinged with an unsettling mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Would this day spark the change he sought, or would he falter under the weight of his upbringing? As Blake approached the market, his heart raced. Each vendor's vibrant display was a feast for the senses, colors fighting for attention under the midday sun. The air buzzed with laughter and conversation, a stark contrast to the sterile boardrooms and muted environments he was used to. He swallowed hard, forcing the remnants of doubt down. Today was not about presenting himself as the successful heir, but rather as a willing participant in something real. Spotting Sophie was easy. She was a cyclone of energy, her hair pulled back, hands expertly assembling food for a cheerful crowd. Her spirit was infectious, and for the first time, Blake truly envied her. He wanted to harness that energy, hoping it would strip away the last layers of his former self. "Hey, city boy," Sophie called out with a grin as she handed him an apron. "Ready to get your hands dirty?" The absurdity of his position struck him mid-laugh. Here he was, gathering tomatoes, layering them into crates alongside seasoned vendors, who shared a quick nod and an amused glance as he struggled with the simple task. This was not the refined lunch with associates he was used to. This was chaotic, visceral, and somehow exhilarating. "You're a natural," Sophie teased as she noticed his failings. "Just watch the bounce when you set them down. It's a delicate science." "Delicate? I've never handled a tomato in my life," he retorted, a grin plastered across his face. The laughter and lightness of the moment were infectious. Yet behind that laughter, he sensed a weight. More than just the tasks ahead, he realized he was stepping closer to an inevitable confrontation with his deeper fears, the truths about his identity, his values, and the fears that lingered from his past. As the day unfolded, he found himself engulfed in conversations he hadn't thought he'd enjoy. The way people talked about food, about connection, sparked something deep within him. Each story transplanted Blake into their worlds, allowing an understanding to blossom. He was intrigued by how they forged their paths, amidst struggles and setbacks, leaning into resilience. Their triumphs were much more than monetary. They resonated with the purpose Blake craved. Yet, as the hours strained on, shadows of hesitation clawed at him. Would he sincerely connect with these individuals? Would he respond authentically when confronted with his father's values? The prospect of disapproval loomed over every joyful exchange, threatening to mute his newfound zeal. When the sun began to dip, plunging the market into a warm golden hue, Blake stepped aside to catch his breath.
He pulled out his phone, hesitating momentarily before scrolling through messages from his father, each missive laden with expectations he could feel pressing down on his shoulders. "You all right?" Sophie's voice broke through his reverie, her brow furrowed with concern. Blake nodded, the internal conflict swirling like a tempest. "Just thinking." "About what?" she pressed, folding her arms, unyielding in her search for honesty. He hesitated, his heart racing as he grappled with the words. Would he reveal how torn he felt, caught between the man he was expected to be and the man he wanted to become? "I guess I'm wondering how to keep this going," he confessed,
the admission creating a tension he hadn't anticipated. Sophie's gaze softened. This isn't just a moment, Blake. If you truly want this, you'll need to make choices, real sacrifices. Are you ready for that? The question hung between them, profound and foreboding. More than the markets and tacos, Blake felt he was staring into a chasm, a precipice that demanded he leap. As dusk settled, he realized he was standing at a crossroads. Would he muster the courage to confront his past and embrace this chaotic life he gravitated toward, or would he step back into the comfortable yet hollow shell that awaited him? With each breath, he sensed the weight of his choices, and he knew this was only the beginning of that transformative journey. But as he watched Sophie begin to pack up, he realized that the hardest decisions were yet to come. What awaits him when he returns to confront the expectations of his past? Would he find strength in those connections, or be overwhelmed by the collision of worlds? Blake's thoughts churned as the evening air cooled around him. Sophie's penetrating gaze lingered in his mind, challenging his self-perception. He couldn't shake the question she had posed. Are you ready for that? It echoed through his consciousness, knocking against the walls of his upbringing, each reverberation demanding an answer. The market had closed for the day, and the excited chatter had dulled into the soft rustle of paper bags and the clinking of leftover coins. In the dimming light, Blake observed the vendors pack away their wares, each movement a decisive action rooted in survival. The ironies of his existence began to crystallize. He'd spent his life accumulating assets of a different kind, yet these people had found wealth in community and resilience. He had never fully grasped what true value meant. As he helped Sophie stack crates of unsold produce, the camaraderie of the vendors enveloped him like a warm blanket. A pair of older women laughed heartily across the way, recounting a mishap from earlier in the day. Their humor was unrefined but genuine, and Blake felt a strange longing for that authenticity, one he had stifled for far too long. His eyes fell on the fresh bread they had baked, crusty and rustic.
He could see the marks etched into its surface from where it had been shaped by hands that understood labor. The realization struck him. He had spent too many years curating efficacy and perfection, neglecting the beauty of imperfection. He wanted to know what it felt like to embrace the rawness of life without the facade of ease derived from privilege. "Blake!" Sophie's voice broke through his reverie again, more insistent now. "You still with us?" "Yeah, I'm here," he chuckled, feeling slightly embarrassed, just caught up in thoughts. "Care to share a few? You seem buried in them." Sophie tied her hair back tightly, eyes sparkling with curiosity. This time Blake hesitated longer, weighing the risk of conversing. Still, the warmth of her presence ignited something inside him. "I've never felt connected like this before. I guess I'm used to keeping my distance from people, hiding behind walls built by expectations." "That's a heavy load, but you're not at work now. You can let some of that go," she replied, leaning on a crate. "You, me, standing here with farmers and good food, we're simply human, no masks." "Easier said than done," he muttered. Did she even comprehend what it was like to belong to a legacy where every mistake felt magnified? True, but it sounds like you're starting to feel the weight of that legacy. Today was a step, Blake. What's next? "I want to explore this," he finally admitted, looking deep into her eyes. "But what if it means turning my back on everything my father wants for me? The family business, it's my entire life. Family doesn't always know what's best for you, Blake. They have their dreams, and you have yours. It's up to you to figure out if those align," Sophie responded, her voice steady. The implication of her words struck deep. Until now, Blake had taken his father's ambitions at face value, choosing to mold himself into the ideal son. Now, staring into the growing darkness around him, he realized he could reshape that mold. Suddenly, he was aware of an unfamiliar sensation blooming in his chest, a desire to fight, to reclaim his narrative. Who was he truly? Blake inhaled deeply, the fresh sense of the previous day's work filling his lungs, invigorating him. He was not simply a billionaire's son. He could be an architect of his own path. As he finished loading the last box into Sophie's truck, a flicker of determination ignited within him. He was ready to confront the expectations that loomed like shadows over him. It was time to step into the light. But what happened when he returned home, faced with the inevitable confrontation? Would he assert the new identity he was crafting, or would he retreat back into the structure that confined him? The night felt charged, a prelude to the storm of decisions awaiting him. In the heart of that simmering conflict,
Blake sensed a defining moment was closing in.
The most challenging test of his resolve lay ahead, and the distant echoes of his past beckoned ominously. Blake could barely contain the turbulence churning inside him as he walked towards his car, each step heavier than the last. The chatter of vendors and the laughter that still lingered in the air faded into a dissonant hum, replaced now by the echo of his father's expectations and the looming responsibilities waiting at home. His heart raced, contending with the turbulence of fear and newfound determination. The drive home felt like a disorienting journey through a fog of uncertainty. Memories flashed across his mind, moments of privilege lived under the shadow of his family's legacy, the polished floors of the boardroom, the endless meetings where he had learned to mirror ambition but not passion. What had he truly achieved? A pre-scripted path that never asked him for his voice was an illusion he no longer wanted. Arriving in the sprawling driveway of his family estate, he felt a strong pull between the life he'd known and the life he was beginning to crave. The house loomed like a grand mausoleum of expectations, the walls fortified by tradition and pressure. Yet, as he parked, a surprising clarity emerged from his inner chaos. He wanted out of the gilded cage. He wanted to breathe. The imposing front door swung open, revealing his father, Kenneth Blake, clad in his signature tailored suit. The gleam in his father's eyes was that of a man prepared to guide his son back to the sort of engagement he held dear. Blake's heart sank. The melancholy of disappointment hung in the air, thick as the evening fog. "Blake," Kenneth boomed, stepping forward as if to envelop him in an embrace that felt more transactional than affectionate. "I was wondering when you'd show up. We need to discuss tomorrow's meeting. There's a merger on the table." "Dad," Blake interrupted, an urgency coursing through him. The term felt foreign on his tongue, heavy with unsaid complexities. "Can we talk about something before all that?" His father's brow furrowed, confusion evident as he led him into the expansive living room, where choice art and memorabilia represented generations of the Blake family's triumph. It was a snapshot of a legacy, but it felt more like a noose tightening around his throat. "What is it? You're not pulling any punches, are you?" Kenneth's voice carried a hint of concern, yet he remained seated, subtly signaling authority. "I can't live like this anymore." The admission shot out of Blake before he could second-guess himself, the words both liberating and petrifying. "Like what? You mean like taking over the family business?" His father's disbelief was palpable. "No, it's not," Blake countered, a newfound resolve layering his voice. "I want to pursue something different, something real. I need to venture out on my own. What if I explored different opportunities?"
There's a world out there, far removed from these walls. Don't you dare throw it all away. Kenneth's voice cut through, sharp and authoritative, like a sword unsheathed. You think those vendors at the market will offer you a life worth living? They scrape by day to day. You don't understand what sacrifice means. The contradiction stung as his father's words echoed with painful accuracy. It also ignited a fire within Blake. Was living comfortably truly synonymous with sacrificing his own authenticity? "But it's not just about comfort, Dad," he pushed back, lowering his voice, struggling to maintain composure in the face of the growing confrontation. "It's about passion." Silence enveloped them, and for the first time, Blake had been unflinching. Time stood still, the gravity of his statement hanging between both men. "Passion doesn't pay the bills, Blake. You'll learn that once you're out there on your own," Kenneth laced with condescension. The rift between them felt insurmountable, yet Blake understood he was choosing to ignite the divide, one that had existed long before this moment. "Then I will learn." Self-doubt crept back, but it fought against an unwavering truth that had begun to cement itself in his psyche. "How can you be so certain?" Kenneth's voice softened, concern replacing anger as he leaned forward, vulnerable for the first time, perhaps understanding Blake was not just a pawn in his grand plan. "Because I'm tired of living your dream instead of pursuing my own," Blake replied, the weight of revelation settling like an anchor. The future hung in limbo, unpredictable, but brightly liberating compared to the suffocating past he had known. The confrontation had marked the beginning of a profound shift. Blake understood that stepping forward meant risking everything, including the comfortable binaries of his titled existence. He was on the precipice of a new journey, one dictated by authentic desires and unfiltered realities. But now the question loomed, what would it mean for him to navigate this unfamiliar terrain alone, without the safety net of expectation? As he stepped away, the door behind him felt heavier than before. Resilience had been ignited, but uncertainty remained. The uncertain path stretched before him like a labyrinth waiting to be explored. What challenges and discoveries lay ahead on this brave expedition? The future beckoned with vast possibilities awaiting his grasp, but was he truly prepared to reach for them? The next morning arrived cloaked in bittersweet resolve.
Blake awoke to the relentless vibrations of his own thoughts, cascading over him like a heavy curtain of fog. He rolled out of bed and faced the vast expanse of his room, adorned with trophies and accolades, symbols of achievement that felt hollow now. He had grown weary of the past's relentless echo, every honor a reminder of who he was supposed to be.
The shadow of his father loomed larger than ever, yet in choosing to break away, Blake felt an invigorating spark within himself, igniting a desire to explore. He stepped outside, greeted by the crisp morning air, each breath a rejuvenation of spirit. He had a plan, however vague it might be. It was absurdly simple, yet simultaneously daunting. He would find a job in a field entirely alien to his upbringing. The thought alone sent a thrill through him, a daring leap into uncertainty. Blake donned an old battered jacket that whispered of days long gone and hopped into his car, determined. He drove towards a small downtown area, one he barely recognized from the lens of childhood privilege. Vibrant murals adorned the alleyways, and the sidewalks teemed with people who wore authenticity like a second skin. As he meandered through the streets, each step felt like an awakening. Surrounding him were small shops and bustling cafes, their owners entrenched in spirited conversations and laughter. Intrigued, he entered a modest bookstore, its scent of aged paper a balm for his restless mind. The owner, a woman with bright blue hair and a welcoming smile, engaged him in lively dialogue about a local art exhibit. It was different here, a world that thrived on connection rather than transactions. Blake felt a burgeoning curiosity swell within him, a forgotten piece of himself stirring to life. This was passion. This was where he belonged. He scanned the bulletin board filled with announcements for workshops and amateur theater auditions. Something inside him stirred at the prospect. Blake remembered his love for storytelling, a talent buried beneath layers of expectation. He found a flyer for a community theater that was hosting auditions for a play that weekend. A daring idea sparked. What if he stepped onto that stage? Could he rediscover the voice he had lost along the way? Despite the excitement bolstering his resolve, a wave of doubt crashed over him. What would his father think? The all-consuming fear of disappointment lingered in the back of his mind, a specter of his upbringing. But then he recalled the conversation from the previous night, the need to pursue his own truth rather than shackling himself to someone else's expectations. With new determination, Blake decided to audition. He could visualize it already, stepping into the spotlight, his heart pounding, but this time it would be different. It would be his performance, unbound from the constraints of his legacy. After jotting down details and summoning his courage, he stepped outside the bookstore and took a deep breath, ready to embrace the uncertainty that lay ahead. His next move was about to redefine everything he understood about himself. He needed not just to take a step, but to leap forward. As the day unfolded, Blake found himself unable to contain his excitement. He began scribbling notes in his car, his mind racing with ideas for his audition.
Yet the weight of his father's expectations lingered, a shadow still trailing behind him. Would this attempt at personal reinvention lead to acceptance or rejection? That night, the air felt charged with possibility. Blake's heart raced, anticipation mingling with anxiety as he prepared for what lay ahead. He was about to confront not only the judgment of others, but also the quiet voice in his head that questioned his decision. The ground beneath him felt unstable, but liberating. Was he truly prepared to face the scorn that might come from his family? In the mirror, he saw not just the son of Kenneth Blake, a billionaire burdened with expectation, but a man very much alive and yearning to express himself beyond the facade. Blake grasped the remnant of his childhood as he stepped out into the night, ready to chase the flicker of authenticity that beckoned ahead. But that whisper of fear also shadowed this exhilaration with doubt. The time had come to render his father's expectations irrelevant. Would he brave the stage, embrace self-discovery, and finally confront the truth that had laid dormant within him? Or would he revert, once again entangled in the suffocating expectations of his legacy? The moment for revelation approached, a defining step towards uncovering the hidden hero within himself. The day of the audition dawned with a clouded sky, mirroring the turmoil in Blake's chest. He stood before the mirror, adjusting his shirt for the 5th time as he fought the urge to turn back and retreat into the safety of his prior existence. Each wrinkle was a reminder of the person he used to project, and he couldn't afford to showcase that Blake today.
This would be a different version, an unguarded iteration of himself yearning for expression. He arrived at the community theater, a worn brick building that pulsed with the energy of stories untold. The scent of paint and wood mingled in the air, each breath triggering a cascade of old memories. His younger self, trepidation over school plays, dazzling audiences briefly before retreating back into a shell. Today, though, this time, he wanted to embrace the roar of applause not as a means to win approval, but as a celebration of his own voice. Stepping through the door, the sound of laughter and lively chatter enveloped him. A group of people gathered near a table, sorting through scripts and discussing lines with animated enthusiasm. Blake felt his nerves tingle. Self-doubt clawed at him like an unwelcome acquaintance. Perhaps he didn't belong here. Maybe he was simply a wealthy boy playing at being an artist. But there was a solid pull in his gut, a glimmering call that beckoned him to stay. He scanned the audition process, the director leading with charisma, emphasizing vulnerability as a key aspect of the performances. Vulnerability. The concept echoed like a sharp echo in Blake's mind, cutting through layers of protection he had built over the years.
To stand on that stage and reveal himself would be to confront the deepest fears, the weight of judgment, the fear of failure, the insistent pressure to conform. To channel vulnerability, he'd have to peel away the protective armor forged by years of expectations. As he witnessed others audition, their raw authenticity struck a chord within him. Each trembling voice, each heartfelt gesture spoke to a universal truth he longed to uncover. What they possessed was courage, a willingness to lay bare their souls without worrying about acceptance. What did Blake truly have to lose? When his name was called, a curious mix of elation and dread surged through him. Walking to the center of the stage felt like stepping into a chasm, both thrilling and terrifying. The intimate light spotlighting him felt both freezing and fervent, illuminating the concealed parts he had long resided with in shadow. Blake took a deep breath, steadied his heartbeat, and channeled the whispers of his past, both the struggles and the achievements. He recited his lines, but it transformed into something more profound than mere words. It was a cathartic release. He spoke not as the son of Kenneth Blake, but as a man eager to untangle himself from a frayed legacy, expressing every ounce of vulnerability he hadn't accessed before. While he performed, he found threads of truth weaving their way through him, igniting a fire he had long suppressed. The fear that had loomed over him morphed into a resolute power. He wasn't here to seek approval, but to accept, for the first time, his multifaceted identity, flawed, passionate, and human. As he finished, and the silence hung thick in the air, he searched for the director's gaze. There was no applause, no immediate reaction, but that was fine. For Blake, it was the meaning behind the performance that mattered most. He had shed a layer. The self he revealed was raw and beautiful. Leaving the theater, a weight lifted from his shoulders. The world around him buzzed with color, the kaleidoscope of possibilities spiraling before him. The shadow of his father's influence lingered, but didn't bear the same suffocating weight. Instead, it became a reminder of the journey he had embarked on. He was ready to frame his own narrative, one that he would write, perform, and live. Yet, as the day dimmed into night, doubt crept back in. What if the audition didn't meet expectations? What if he had bared his soul only to be met with indifference? That fear gnawed at him, a reminder that he was still in the midst of a battle, not just for his passion, but for his identity itself. The realization hit him. This was just the beginning. The performance had sparked a new chapter, an awakening he couldn't ignore. What would he discover about himself in this new phase of exploration? The real challenge awaited. Would he have the courage to confront the opinions waiting beyond the stage, particularly those of his father?
As Blake stood on the brink of his own transformation, the next turn loomed ahead, demanding that he rise to meet it. The sun rose over Blake Hutchinson, illuminating his new path with tangible warmth and promise. He stood before the expansive mirror of his bedroom, a far cry from the polished reflections of a privileged heir. Today marked the day of change, a culmination of revelations that propelled him toward a life he had long evaded. Gone were the layers of expectation. Today he would embrace his newfound aspirations and redefine the narrative that had previously restrained him. Stepping into his car, Blake felt the adrenaline pulse through him, igniting the fight within. He was no longer just the billionaire's son burdened by familial obligations. He was a man on a mission, a passion seeker. With each turn of the wheel, he headed towards Sophie's taco truck, the backdrop of his awakening,
a symbol of authentic resilience amidst his previously sterile existence. Arriving at the market, he spotted Sophie, her hands skillfully crafting tacos. The vibrant colors of her truck juxtaposed starkly against the drab expectations of his former life. As she caught sight of him, her eyes sparkled with surprise, and Blake felt a rush of determination welling within. This was not merely about her tacos, but the symbol of what they represented, a visceral connection to a life lived unapologetically. "Ready to dive in?" Sophie called out, her voice lively, inviting him into this rich tapestry of experience. Blake grinned, feeling the gravity of that question. "More than ever," he replied, driven not just by commitment, but genuine joy. As the day unfolded, Blake immersed himself in the vibrancy of the market, serving alongside Sophie with buoyant energy. Every customer interaction, every laugh shared, drew him further away from the confines of his past. The shadow of his father's legacy seemed to grow less intimidating as he engaged with people whose dreams were enmeshed with hard work and dedication. He understood that contributing to a community required grit and compassion, and for the first time, he felt deeply connected to those ideals. After a busy afternoon, Blake and Sophie took a break, retreating to a nearby park bench. The sun set, casting beautiful hues across the sky. Sophie's expression shifted, becoming curious. "I saw you at the audition. How did it go?" The memory pulsed in his veins, a vibrant reminder of how far he had come. It felt different, freeing. "I finally put myself out there in a way I never thought I would." Sophie smiled knowingly, understanding the magnitude behind those words. "You stepped into your truth, Blake. That's what counts." What a revelation it was. Blake Hutchinson, who once clung fiercely to imitative success, now sought to shape his own identity through interaction with those he once underestimated.
He had done more than simply assert himself. He had conquered that hidden fear of authenticity while forging new relationships built on mutual respect and understanding. As his transformation began to ripple outward, another chain of events unfolded. He began to receive positive feedback from the audition, paving the way for a community showcase. The director approached him about a role in an upcoming production, acknowledging his unique interpretation. His performance had resonated with authenticity. He had demonstrated raw talent that transcended the superficiality of his prior world. This recognition felt more fulfilling than any promotion he'd ever received at the family firm. It cemented his path toward a life laden with purpose, enabling him to communicate not just his story, but the stories of those like Sophie, individuals who fought for dreams against the odds. Over dinner one evening, as Blake shared this joyous news with Sophie, he saw pride illuminate her features. It triggered within him a profound realization. He had achieved something greater than personal fulfillment. He had set himself on a trajectory toward independence and recognition of his own. "It all starts with the choice to step forward," she remarked softly. "Yes," Blake agreed, echoes of self-discovery resonating in his soul. "And now I want to pave a way for others too. My experience can assist them in their journeys." Sophie nodded, impressed. "That's the spirit, Blake. We can partner our efforts, fuse our passions." He envisioned a future where he would champion not only his dreams, but also those of countless individuals inspired by their resilience, just as he'd been inspired by Sophie. With clarity so deep it cut through any remaining hesitations, Blake sat across from Sophie, feeling confident, competent, and ready to embrace opportunities that lay ahead. He was remaking the core of who he was into someone substantive, someone deserving. As they formulated a strategy for utilizing his platform effectively, the undeniable satisfaction of their collaborative efforts took root. Blake was not just returning to follow trends, he would drive real change. With each passing day, he grew bolder, more anchored in his convictions. The sense of risk had articulated a confidence previously masked by inherited anxieties. No longer was he the captive of legacy. He stood as an architect of his purpose. In time, his father's expectations might collide with this newfound conviction, an inevitable confrontation, no doubt. Yet Blake felt prepared. He had founded a solid framework of awareness within himself. Each sacrifice endured had initiated his growth, and he longed to demonstrate his evolution to his father.
that he could conquer more than just the constraints of privilege. The horizon awaited him, ready to meet boldness and determination with open arms.
He understood the path would not always be smooth, but he smiled knowingly at that thought. Every stumble would fortify him further. Blake Hutchinson had indeed transformed into an authentic individual, recognized not for his lineage, but for the intrinsic value he had found within himself. The truth of his journey would carry through his work, casting ripples of empowerment and inspiration for the many untold stories waiting to unfold. With a steadying heart, he faced the new day, determined to forge ahead. Now is the moment for you to take action. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire your own journey of transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and make it possible for more people to connect with these transformative narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. Your thoughts matter to our community. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and witness the power of personal overcoming. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal growth stories understand the importance of uplifting others through their actions.